So that, can you see that whatever is based on a principle is alive? It's a living thing. It's a dynamic thing. It is a moving thing. That the idea of the principle is life. That principle is life. You have that beautiful relationship between those two synonymous terms for God, principle and life. That the moment you touch the principle, you have life. We'll get into that a little bit further along. Another point we need to make then, and to set clear, because we are often accused of not being loyal, of having been disloyal to Boston or disloyal to the board of directors. Consequently, I suppose, disloyal to Mrs. Eddy. And so I must tell you that the moment you understand the principle of Christian Science, you find that you can no longer be loyal to people. No longer loyal to people. And so we are not loyal, and I am not loyal to any teacher. And I can sit up here and I can even say to you that representing the Kapler Institute and the Dorley Kapler line, that I can say to you that I am not loyal to John Dorley, that I am not loyal to Max Kapler. And Max Kapler would be the first one to throw his hat in the ring and say, yippee, hooray for that. I'm glad that I've been able to raise a student who does not have a personal allegiance, who is not personally loyal to me, but who understands the principle that I teach, the principle of Christian Science. And so we are not loyal to any line of individuals, to a personal sense of a revelator, to personal authorities, to human organizations or institutions. And you know that Mrs. Eddy said, follow your leader only so far as she follows the textbook. She took it right back to the textbook, took it right back to that divine principle. And so we must see that the supreme divine authority of the principle and science, which is given to us in the Christian Science textbook, is all that we can be loyal to. Mrs. Eddy said, you can well afford to give me up, since you have in science and health your teacher and guide. Students who make science and health a study are in no danger of mistaking their way. So you see that we just become more and more safe, more and more secure, more and more free from a personal sense of Christian Science as we begin to understand the textbook in its teaching of the divine principle. So what has brought us here today? What has brought you here today is the true church. This is the subject of our talk, and you have come to find out what the true church is, the true church of Christian Science today. And I am telling you that what has brought you here is the true church that is within you. The structure of that true church that is within each one of us has drawn us here today. It's the kingdom of heaven within you. It's already within you. You know that right at the beginning of the textbook that Mrs. Eddy said, the time for thinkers has come. The time really to assert our God-given authority, our God-given man right, our inalienable right to be free and to look into what this principle is all about. someone brought to my attention recently the fact that Mrs. Eddy was quite taken aback for the fact that they had tried to form a committee. You recall that? That they tried to form a committee back in, I think it was 1891, to tell Christian Scientists what they could read. And Mrs. Eddy caught this very quickly, and she said, I've got to say something about that issue. And so she wanted to put that information, she wanted to put her response into the journal, but the journal had already been printed. But she felt so strongly about it that she had a little card drawn up, a card that would be inserted into each journal that was printed. And this card then would go to everyone who purchased a journal, or who was a subscriber to the journal, or whoever went into the reading room to read that journal. They would find this card in there by Mrs. Eddy. And what did she say on that card? She said, I think it would have been wiser not to have organized the General Association for the Dispensing of Christian Science Literature. I consider my students as capable individually of selecting their own reading material, their own reading matter, and circulating it as a committee would be, which is chosen for this purpose. She said, I shall have nothing further to say on this subject, but hope my students' conclusions will be wisely drawn and tend to promote the welfare of those outside as well as inside this organization. So she felt very strongly that the individual was able to make these selections for themselves, to make this choice for themselves, to look into the whole question of what Christian Science is as an impersonal principle. Well, we want to now answer that question. What is the newly emerging form of the Christian Science Church today? What is love's promise? How is it being fulfilled? And you see that the meaning of that church involves our seeing the meaning of the Church of Christ Scientists. That's the name that Mrs. Eddy gave to her church. And in order for us to understand, therefore, what this church is, what its purpose is, what its intent is, we have to understand what the Church of Christ is. We want to see the true Christian Science Church. You notice that I put true in the invitation. What does it mean, true? It means to be consistent with fact or reality. Fundamental. To be true means essential. Exactly conforming to a pattern. In accordance with reality, fact, or truthfulness. And so the church that we look at today will be the true church, the one that conforms to reality, the one that conforms with truthfulness. So you see in your study material on the first page that I have given you a definition of church. This definition is from the electronic dictionary, the American Heritage Dictionary. And I had a marvelous time working with this subject and with that dictionary, and made the most amazing discovery that that dictionary is filled with definitions that are taken from Christian Science and from the Christian Science textbook. And so what you see here as a six-part definition, the sixth part of that definition being the definition according to Christian Science, is not, it's not the case that I have added number 6 and have put in Christian Science and what I have found in the textbook as Mrs. Eddy's definition, but this is the way it appears in the American Heritage Dictionary. So I'd like to go through that definition with you. We see that there is a range, there is a whole range of definition of that term church. Number 1, a building for public, especially Christian worship. 2, the company of all Christians, that is to say, a spiritual body, you see, or a specific Christian denomination, a congregation. 3, public divine worship in a church, a religious service. 4, the clerical profession, the clergy. 5, ecclesiastical power, as distinguished from the secular. 6, Christian Science, the structure of truth and love. Mary Baker Eddy. Do you hear that those definitions are all quite different from each other? They are unique from each other. But that when we come to the 6th definition, we feel as though we're somewhere else, as though we've left even the whole field or range of everything that's been covered in 1 through 5, that when we come to 6, we say, wait a minute, this is something completely new, completely different. And so what we have there is actually the definition of church, as Mrs. Eddy gives it in the Christian Science textbook, on page 583 in the glossary. And I will read the whole definition to you. Church, the structure of truth and love, whatever rests upon and proceeds from divine principle. And she goes on, the church is that institution which affords proof of its utility. You hear a change, almost as though the altitude drops, or that there is some kind of a translation now from that first initial statement about the structure of truth and love, whatever rests upon and proceeds from the divine principle, which is a completely immaterial definition of church. Now she comes almost as though to a further level and says the church is that institution which affords proof of its utility and is found elevating the race, rousing the dormant understanding. You hear as though it's a coming down and then a lifting up, coming down, lifting up. Elevating the race, rousing the dormant understanding from material beliefs to the apprehension of spiritual ideas and the demonstration of divine science, thereby casting out devils or error and healing the sick. I wonder if you can hear in just these 2 aspects that we've taken, these 2 definitions on this page, that we have different levels somehow implied, that we have different dimensions of church. You know that any subject today that is studied and approached in a progressive way, in a scientific way, is studied dimensionally, is seen dimensionally, is approached dimensionally. That the approaching of a subject dimensionally is that which is counter to reductionism, to what is called reductionism. In other words, the attempt to reduce something to just one thing. There is nothing that can be reduced to just one view, one aspect. That is reductionism. It's when we say a thing is nothing but. Man is nothing but this and this and this. And so every field takes the question, what is man? And the medical profession says man is nothing but this and this and this. Blood and bones and physicality and so forth, and anatomy, etc. Psychology comes along and says man is nothing but a certain psychosis or a certain mental state. And so every discipline has attempted to approach a subject through the reductionism, by reducing something to nothing but this. Whereas dimensionalism says you can't do that. You have to see that, man is all those things. If you're going to take man on that level, that man isn't just a psychosis. Man isn't just blood and bones and cartilage and all of those elements that are concerned in medicine and in anatomy. And so we have to see that every subject that we look at can be considered dimensionally, can be seen dimensionally. And we have a wonderful example of that right here in our definitions of church. And when you consider something dimensionally, you also see that you have a deep structure and you have surface structures. That you have, this is very much seen in, for instance, language. Perhaps you're aware of the study of language and of the transformational grammar, where they see that there is a deep structure, that is to say an abstract pattern that is underlying the construction of every surface structure of language. That the deep structure is that which governs the surface structure. And so a deep structure is defined as the abstract pattern which underlies the construction in the surface structure. A surface structure is defined as the formal structure as it actually occurs, as distinguished from the abstract underlying deep structure. So you see that what we have in our definitions is a selection of, an array of surface structures, and we have the deep structure, reality of what lies behind those surface structures. So that what we see in that definition is that a building, whether we have a building or we have the body, the Christian body, or we have the clergy, or we have the ecclesiastical power behind a church, that these are surface structures, but that what Christian Science presents is the deep structure.